The crisp September air carried the scent of fresh flowers as Sandra Bullock stepped onto the red carpet of the exclusive Parisian fashion show. The venue, the iconic Petit Palais, was alive with energy. Cameras flashed relentlessly, capturing every detail of the evening. Sandra's beige dress, elegantly cut and impeccably tailored, stood out not for its extravagance, but for its simplicity. While other guests shimmered in sequins and bold couture, Sandra embodied a quiet confidence, the kind of elegance that doesn't demand attention yet commands respect. As she made her way down the carpet, photographers called out, "Sandra, over here." She responded with a genuine smile, offering a subtle wave. Her makeup was light, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. To some, her look might have seemed understated for an event of this magnitude, but to others, it was a refreshing authenticity, a stark contrast to the excess surrounding her. Sandra reached the grand entrance, where event staff greeted her warmly. Her seat was reserved in the front row, a position of prestige occupied only by the most distinguished guests. She nodded in appreciation and walked toward her chair, well aware of the gazes following her. It wasn't just curiosity, there was also silent judgment. As she settled into her seat, a murmur rose beside her. Two social media influencers, dressed in eye-catching shimmering gowns, entered the same row. Their perfectly styled hair and heavy makeup reflected the bright event lights. They whispered to each other, stifling laughter as they observed those around them. "Wait, is that Sandra Bullock?" one of the influencers muttered, not bothering to lower her voice. "Yeah, I expected something more spectacular." "That dress, beige?" "Seriously?" the other replied with a hushed giggle. Sandra heard them but pretended not to notice, keeping her gaze fixed on the still empty runway. This wasn't the first time she had faced remarks like these. The world of fame could be cruel, and the fashion industry even more so. Still, something about those words stung a little more than it should have. "She was amazing in the 90s, but her time has passed, don't you think?" the first influencer added, her voice laced with faux innocence. "Exactly. Like, who even dresses like that for an event like this?" Sandra took a slow, deep breath. Her heart didn't race, her cheeks didn't flush with embarrassment. She had been through far worse. Even so, the words lingered in the air like an invisible poison. The lights in the hall gradually dimmed, and the hum of the guests faded into an expectant silence. The show was about to begin. The large screen at the end of the runway lit up, displaying the first glimpses of the collection. Then, the first notes of the orchestral soundtrack resonated through the venue, setting the perfect atmosphere. Sandra, seated in the front row, maintained her composed expression. She had always appreciated the world of fashion, not just as an aesthetic display but as an art form, a reflection of culture and individuality. To her, every fabric, every cut, and every texture were fragments of a story designers sought to tell. The first model emerged at the end of the runway, wearing a structured and sophisticated piece. The cameras flashed in near-perfect unison, capturing the moment. The applause started softly but quickly grew, following the rhythm of the show. One model after another walked with precise synchronization, their expressions unreadable while the audience observed in quiet admiration. Sandra clapped politely at each new piece unveiled, her eyes studying the details, the way the fabric draped, the daring nature of some combinations, the fluidity of movement. But while she absorbed the beauty of the spectacle, the influencers beside her had a different focus. "Oh, that's way too much," one of them muttered, rolling her eyes as a voluminous translucent gown appeared. "I'd never wear that." "Looks like my grandma's curtains," the other scoffed, barely containing her laughter. Sandra once again pretended not to hear. She knew fashion was subjective, but the two women seemed less interested in the show and more invested in making snide remarks. For a fleeting moment, Sandra wondered if that mindset would ever change. In the past, during the peak of her career, criticism came from tabloids. Now, it came from social media. Anyone with a phone could broadcast unfiltered, cruel opinions to millions. "But nothing tops this look sitting next to us, right?" one of the influencers whispered, glancing directly at Sandra. The other chuckled, her eyes scanning Sandra's understated beige dress. I know, right? It screams, I tried to be elegant but picked the wrong decade. Sandra held her composure, but this time, it was personal. She took a slow breath and fixed her gaze on the runway, trying to refocus on the intricate details of the designs. But it was too late, their words had already seeped in like poison. No matter how strong she was, no matter how much experience she had, she wasn't immune to the sting of public ridicule. Especially knowing that within hours, comments like these could be circulating online for millions to see. The isolation intensified. Despite the bustling crowd, the dazzling spotlights, and the rhythmic procession of models, she felt alone. And then, a remark crossed the line. It's kind of sad, right? She used to be an icon. Now, she's just another woman clinging to relevance. This time, Sandra felt the blow because, deep down, that was the fear haunting an entire generation, the fight against invisibility, the idea that after a certain age, women become unseen. Her eyes blinked slowly. She didn't want to show that their words affected her, but something in her posture changed. For a brief moment, she considered speaking up, not to defend herself, but to challenge the shallow, disposable mindset that the influencers seemed to embody. But before she could make a decision, an unexpected sound broke the silence behind them. Someone cleared their throat. It was subtle, discreet, but heavy with intent. The influencers froze. Sandra noticed it too. Someone had been sitting behind them, listening to everything. And now, that person was about to speak. Keanu Reeves leaned forward, his calm yet commanding presence impossible to ignore. Dressed in a sharp black suit, his expression was steady, his gaze piercing. The influencers froze, their smirks fading as they realized they'd been overheard. Sandra, seated in front, remained composed but subtly glanced back. Funny, Keanu said, his voice calm but firm. The influencers forced nervous smiles, but Keanu wasn't done. What exactly did you find so funny? He asked, his tone cutting through their facade. The room seemed to hold its breath as the influencers stumbled over their words, their confidence shattered. Sandra, still composed, felt a shift in the air. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel invisible. As the show continued, a hush fell over the room. Sandra felt a familiar gaze and turned to see Coco Chanel walking toward her. The legendary designer, her silver hair shimmering under the lights, took Sandra's hands in hers. My dear, Coco said, her voice warm yet commanding, you remind me of what true elegance is. The room erupted into whispers of admiration. The influencers, now pale, realized they had lost whatever argument they thought they had. Coco's words echoed through the venue, elegance isn't about being seen, it's about being remembered. The night ended with Sandra at the center of attention, not for her dress or her fame, but for the quiet strength she embodied. The influencers disappeared into the crowd, their voices now insignificant. Keanu, watching from the sidelines, offered a subtle smile. Coco Chanel, standing nearby, nodded approvingly. Sandra's phone buzzed with a message, you never had to prove anything to anyone. But it was beautiful to watch. As she left the venue, Sandra realized something profound. True elegance isn't about being remembered for a moment, it's about being unforgettable. By morning, headlines had shifted. Luxury brands rethought their campaigns, and industry leaders spoke out against ageism and superficiality. Sandra, now a symbol of timeless elegance, delivered a keynote speech at the Paris Fashion Council. True beauty, she said, doesn't fade with time, it deepens, it strengthens, it becomes unshakable. And as she stood there, the world realized what Sandra had always known, real elegance isn't about being seen, it's about being remembered.